everybody, welcome back to the channel. And today I'm here with another author interview with Mr. Yunus Yusupov. He has a new book called Vindex in Machina, and I have read it. It's a really, really good book, and I'm really thankful, Mr. Yusupov. Thank you for coming onto the channel.
Thank you very much for having me, Rich.
Okay, so I'll jump right in. So when did you start writing?
I started writing the book itself actually a very long time ago, approximately February 2010, but I didn't get to it until the beginning of pandemic, actually, sometime March and February 2020.
And then so how long would you say you've taken writing seriously?
Well, seriously is actually a good question here because since about 2012, I've been writing a lot of fan fictions, different poems, mini stories, and haikus. And I've been submitting them under an anonymous nickname on the internet. And just up until about 2 years ago, my followers told me, why not write a novel? I thought to myself, yeah, I think it's about time.
Is Vindex in Machina, it's your first book, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Is it the first book that you have ever written, or have there been other books that you wrote the whole thing, you just chose not to publish it?
Yes, absolutely. There were books that I chose not to publish. Rather, I didn't really have an ability to do so back then, be it financial or age restriction. Really.
So how many books are you've published now, Vindex in Machina? Is it published now officially?
Yes, it's been published for a few weeks now.
Okay. And how many books are you currently writing? Any books, or are you just kind of trying to see how Vindex is going to do?
Well, it doesn't really matter to me how well will it do sales-wise, because there's this story that I want to deliver. And other than working on a sequel for the book, I'm also working on another science fiction, a comedy book, and somewhat of a horror book at the same time. Drafts for all of them are ready, but it takes time to perfect these things.
Okay, so just talking about right now, Vindex and Machina, which is, I've read the book. It's a really, really fun book. The basis of the overview was that, correct me if I misunderstood anything wrong, but it's been around 27, 28 years since Earth has been in uninhabitable, because there are these creatures who are the Villas, who have basically attacked and made everything. So all these people are living in a massive space station in space, and they're trying to see what they can do. They're trying to find out what exactly happened. And during this, there are different soldiers. There's Riley, who I believe is a time traveler, and he time traveled throughout. And then there's the main characters who are at least who started off the book, or Bethany. There was Saeed, Anderson. There are a couple more too. That was my overview. What would you like to say? Just if you had to give anyone a 1-minute pitch, which I'm sure you must have done for Vindex, what would you tell them about the book?
This book is, at first sight, the idea here is to give the reader an idea that potentially there is just an apocalypse and humans are trying to think, what is there else to do? The Earth is uninhabitable. We do not have any means of doing outer world colonizations. But in fact, the problems are a lot bigger. If we're taking examples from books such as by H.G. Wells, The Time Machine itself, we humans are a lot smaller and a lot more prone to manipulation. This book, what it's trying to do is say how humans are insignificant in comparison to what lies beyond the Earth.
Okay. I mean, that fits with everything that I read in the book because the book is like it's set on such of like a grand cosmos. It really reminded me of, I don't know if you've watched the Guardians of the Galaxy movies from Marvel,
Absolutely.
but I'm a big Marvel fan. I'm a really big Marvel fan. I just watched
Likewise.
I just watched No Way Home, Spider-Man No Way Home for like the fourth time yesterday. And it really reminded me of Guardians, like how they were like traveling to the different planets and like this planet is this far away. We need the fuel, we need this and that. Like it really reminded me of that travel. And I thought it was really cool because the book is set at a later time period where there's enough technology. And like they said, the technology was so good that people found it hard to believe, like, is this real technology or is it magic? And the book kind of like travels those boundaries. Did you are there any specific like movies and TV shows or books that you like specifically took inspiration from?
Yes, absolutely. There are actually too many to list, but
Mhm.
I'll let you in on a secret that I actually talked with the primary people behind which I took the inspiration. The story of the entire book actually started as a fan fiction to a video game, if you know it, called Into the Breach.
Mhm.
The same creators of Faster Than Light. Uh, I actually, as I said, it started as a fan fiction. It had 20 pages, 40 pages, 60, then 100. And from there, you understand that it's a little bit too big to be fan fiction now.
Mhm.
So I talked to the Subset Games about this whole thing, and they said, absolutely, you can have the base, just so long as you're not violating our copyrights.
Mhm.
So primary inspirations are the Into the Breach and Half-Life, but pretty much we can take everything else from movies such as Pacific Rim,
Mhm. Yeah.
Guardians of the Galaxy. Uh, we There's a little bit of a weird comparison, but a little bit by the end, the time machine itself from the Wells. But people will understand what I'm talking about when they will reach the ending of the book.
Mhm. Yeah, and for me too, it kind of felt a little bit like with the fighting style, kind of like Halo as well. A little like combination between the video game Halo and the movie Pacific Rim, because they have these armors, kind of like it was like a mix of like Iron Man and Pacific Rim. They have like these armors, right? The Vindex armors that the different people they'll use the armors because they can use that and the weaponry to fight the different monsters that they
That's
encounter.
correct.
That was my favorite part was like seeing how the Vindex armor worked. What was your favorite part of the book? Like, without giving away too much.
Sure. So I didn't want to make a simple, basic apocalypse premise in here. Uh, since the very childhood, I've been a very huge fan of the general sciences, robotics specifically.
Mhm.
I've seen and read plenty of books, movies, TV shows, which have got gigantic mechs in them, but they all had some sort of a over the top fantasy in them. What I wanted to make is something that relates to two specific things. First, a proper mechanized machines
Mhm.
where every detail is realistic. Almost nothing is made up. Uh, and the second that is intertwined is the scientific theory of tachyons. Um, Obviously, it is currently in a stage of a theory and there is no practical use yet. But for those who don't know, the tachyons are a specific type of scientific particles theory that pretty much proves that potentially time travel can exist.
Mhm.
And in depth, starting from the chapter 6, is where I start exploring uh, how can I mix those two things, a realistic mechanized machine and a theory of tachyons. This was my most favorite part of developing the book,
Mhm.
giving something that is not entirely fictitious, but something that is very much uh, can be achieved. That is the first thing. And the second is how far a person can go
Mhm.
for their goal. Because, as you know, the primary protagonist has gone through many attempts to do what he can,
To stop.
ultimately
Yeah.
failing every time. But imagine this: you are tasked with something really big. There is no going back. There are two outcomes to this: either you succeed or you fail, and that failure will haunt you for unforeseeable amount of time. This
Mhm.
is the most important part. The two protagonists and how neither of them are willing to fail.
Yeah. Okay. What was the hardest part to write in the book?
Oh, well, I'm pretty sure you can guess. The hardest part definitely is the structure itself. Usually, if a story is told streamlined, here's the beginning, here's the middle, and here's the ending. This specific story was absolutely necessary to keep suspension, tension in there
Hmm.
where it is, to start first here, then go back there, then go all the way very far into the future and all the way backwards into the past. This was hardest because I need to constantly brainstorm, miss no loopholes, and uh, structure the chapters in a way that people would be able to understand it, so that chapter 10, for example, is not reliant on chapter 30 for the reader to understand what is happening. That was a nightmare to make, but nevertheless, I still enjoy it.
No, I saw that too. It's just this is a very small spoiler. It's early on in the book, but there's one scene where like saw Bethany, she was down in like the cellar area in the spaceship. And like the chapter leaves off on a cliffhanger where she and her friends are looking back in horror and they're like frozen in fear. And then the next chapter, I believe, was back when they were on Earth trying to save people.
Yes.
And that's when you introduce what the monsters are. And then you go back to the chapter then you go back to their present time and space, where then you can bring in the monsters into the story. I really like that personally, because I'm usually not a big fan of like the reverse storytelling, but this one it worked very well because you were able to give like lots of more context to the story, and made you, because you saw that most of the main characters, even 27 years ago, or maybe it was little less than that, they were on Earth fighting, and like it still must haunt them. And then seeing those monsters for the first time in a while it's like it's a really big shock to them.
Yes, absolutely. That was my most favorite part. It's choosing the chapters, which ones are going to be an arc of constant suspension, which one's going to be an arc of calm research type stories where we just need to take a break here
Mhm.
from constant action. Let's think back. How can the story go from here? And unfortunately, the second writer who has been helping me has refused to have their name on the book,
Mhm.
uh, and wouldn't be able to take participation due to personal issues.
Okay.
But there is something that they asked me to relay to pretty much anyone I'm giving an interview to. The point here is that the best part of a story, as they said, is how should I put it into words? Mm, as I said, it's relatively difficult making the story in
Mhm.
overlapping times. First future, then backwards, then future again, and back to the past again. But that person actually knew very well how to help me out in a way that so that there are no specific questions about uh, less of questions. What I'm trying to say is that, let's say, for example, I'm taking a little bit of a arc in here. It's some sort of
Mhm.
action, uh, and it takes a little bit too long because it goes in a constant time. First time when I've been writing this book, that's how it was. You can imagine if we're going from all the way past, it will be nothing but action, 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 action for
Yeah.
way too many chapters. And that person said that when you want to mix it up properly, first write the full story, then delete the whole thing, then from the top of your head, do it again so that you have a new sort of inspiration, a blank slate is how they said it. Because, and I agree with them, when you have a blank slate with a general idea, it's somewhat easier to write a story this way.
That makes sense. That's a really good piece of advice. I like that. That's a really cool way to write stories. What are you most proud of in this book?
Oh, what I'm most proud, well, other than the fact that it is my first ever published novel, I think there is, well, like I've said, I have been in the talks with Subset Games, the original makers of the video game Into the Breach. The proudest moment is the negotiations there. I've spoken to my personal attorney of things I'm allowed to do and not. What can I take from the fan fiction into my full-fledged novel? We had a very, very long talks. He said, you can't do anything. You have to completely start from the beginning. Proudest is probably how great Subset Games were for allowing me. I'll take so much inspirational materials. Obviously, the names, places, and events are altered, but the Proudest is my personal thanks to the company.
What was it like, the publishing process for your first book?
Absolutely nerve-wracking. It's not the same thing as publishing your poems, haikus, or fan fictions for free somewhere on the anonymous forums. It is absolutely not the same thing. It's not even the fear of money will go to waste. No, absolutely not. It's if in a fan fiction that I'm constantly writing, updating chapter after chapter, I can change it. It is not going to be as easy here. If I'd been met with absolute criticism for my book, well, I wouldn't get depressed per se, but I would definitely try to do a lot better. But yeah, that is absolutely the scariest part, the criticism. Although, I must say, so far, even with the constructive criticism that has been provided to me so far, it has been absolutely great, and I probably have been worried for absolutely nothing either.
No, it was really enjoying for me to read this book, because like sometimes I'll have to, like, generally when you don't read a book, like when if you're told to read a book, like for school, or if like somebody contacts you, please read my book, generally you always want to read the book, but like there's a different mindset you bring to it versus when like you find a book on the shelf and you're like, oh, this looks really interesting, I want to read this. But this was like the first book in a long time where I really genuinely had a lot of fun, because after like 30-40 pages in, I was actually like, I was hooked in on the characters, because every other chapter had more of a, what's it called, more of a cliffhanger ending, which is like, okay, I gotta read the next one to figure out what happens. So I really did, like, I'm genuinely saying, I genuinely had a really fun time reading this book.
Thank you very much. And if I may add to that, when you said what was one of the better parts of writing a book, yeah, absolutely. That is one of the other things, the cliffhangers. You always have to keep your readers under suspense. How do I do it? And that is actually one of the things that I've been brainstorming a lot. I written the book, and solely because of the cliffhangers, I've gone through editing about, well, 4 times to be precise. Yes, entire thing edited, not exactly from scratch, but a lot, because I've been going through each chapter and I'm thinking, okay, is this a suitable ending? No, okay, start up from the beginning, something like that.
No, That's what I've noticed with a lot of like TV shows now too. Like I've noticed it's if I've noticed now every single Marvel show that comes on Disney Plus, every single episode that they have ends with a cliffhanger. And because they'll release the episodes weekly, that'll make the person be like, okay, well, I gotta come back and see because they'll leave the episodes on like big cliffhangers. They'll even do that for like Netflix shows too, just like Outer Banks, right? Even though they drop the whole season at one time, or Stranger Things, they drop it all at one time. Every single episode is always left on a cliffhanger because that's the best way to get the reader, the watcher to come back.
Absolutely, and it's an even bigger art to actually make a good cliffhanger, because sometimes, there's this cliffhanger, it doesn't exactly leave you wanting more.
Mm-hmm.
It probably leaves you infuriated. It's not exactly the most common thing, but I'm pretty sure you would know
Yeah.
about.
Um, what are you most excited for readers to like see in the book? Is there any specific ideas or any specific plot points that you are excited for readers, and you're like, oh, I can't wait till they read that part?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Other than the ending, of course, which
Mhm.
actually I specifically made it to be a little bit polarizing in a way that people will either love it or they will hate it.
Mhm.
But tiny bit of a secret, there's more books coming on the way, which is why well, they'll have to wait.
I was gonna
But yeah,
get to that. Is there a sequel coming?
absolutely. The draft finished. It is going through the editing process, and I'm hoping sometime end of the summer. Hoping, actually. But yeah, there's a lot more. Back to your question, though. Well, what I will absolutely want fans, other than the endings, there are three things. First, it's the relationship between the characters. This is what I tried to put one of the biggest amounts of efforts to. If you know of creation of Neil Druckmann, the video game called The Last of Us,
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
is one of the best examples of the character relations. Not just make them, there's a primary protagonist, but then there's secondary, they'll have a little bit of interaction, and that's about it. No. For all of the protagonists in there, a very tight, intertwined stories. This is what I want. These are not just the people who survived the Earth and are looking for a solution. This is going to be a lot more personal issues. That's the first thing. Second, robotics. I pretty sure I actually have a personal problem sometimes when it comes to robotics in general. If the subject comes up, and thank God it comes up rarely, I can ramble on forever. But being a fan of even non-realistic robotics, be it Armored Core or Pacific Rim, I wanted to relay to people what the realistic robotics look like, what do they function like, what do they control like, everything.
Mhm.
And well, despite a far future of 2 centuries ahead into the future, there are people who understand robotics in general will still see many relations to modern technology here. That is the second thing. And third is finding out about what it means to actually be committed. I'm pretty sure that many of us eventually have been committing to some sort of a goal, but then
Mhm.
quitting it. And well, I wanted to say a little bit more, but I nearly spoiled the very middle of the book, a very heavy spoiler. The third last thing, what I was talking about, is the commitment.
Mhm.
And yeah, these are the most that I'm excited for readers to find out.
Yeah, okay. No, that's really good because I really like all this stuff too. Because the character relationships are really interesting to me because you have people who are higher up, lower up in charge, and then you have the people who are like the scientists and the fighters. But like seeing how their roles like they like not flip, but like they were willing to step into each other's roles and like trying to figure out like how is their relationship, are they more than just like work, are they more than just like work acquaintances, like how much do they actually genuinely care for each other as their situation gets tougher and tougher. That was
Yes,
that was
absolutely.
really cool. And then what would you give, this is just now moving away from the book, just a couple last general questions. What would you tell someone who is, I always ask all the authors that come on this, what would you tell someone who wants to be an author? What piece of advice would you give to them?
Well, there is one. There is one that I've been abiding by my whole life, actually, even way before I've been interested in starting writing. In general, I love art. Since the childhood, been interested in everything art related. I just recently, entirety of my free time, I'm dedicated to something new art related. I learned to draw, play musical instruments, make animations, comics, and all that stuff. But all of that is one single thing. It's an art. And the best advice I can give, art cannot be rushed, absolutely no matter what. Like I've said in the beginning, it has been 13 years since I actually came up with the idea, but I would not allow it to go out into the public until I felt that, yes, this is perfect. And personally, I cannot do anything to make it even better. No matter how much time it takes, never rush the art.
Thank you. That's all I have for today. Again, thank you so much, Mr. Yusupov, for coming on. It was really, truly a pleasure for you to come on. Such a joy. Everybody, I will be posting my Vindex and Machina review. Just look to that whenever this interview gets posted. Look for 2-3 days down the line. The review will be out there. Everybody, please make sure that you read this book. Trust me, it is such a fun sci-fi book to read. It was the most fun I've had reading in a book. I'm genuinely saying this. It's the most fun I've had reading a book in the last year or two. And again, Mr. Yusupov, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And everybody, I'll see you in the next video.